Hi, SAS listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. I'm your host, Dave Markel, coming to you from the Long Valley studio in Washington, Utah. Today's conversation is one that cuts straight to the heart of what this show exists to do. It's about what can hide behind normal appearances, the cost of silence, and the courage it takes to finally tell the truth. This is episode 166. And my guest this week is Jason Patrick Berry, author of his newly released powerful memoir, Secrets Beneath. Jason's story is one many survivors will immediately recognize. From the outside, his childhood looked perfectly normal, even idyllic. But behind closed doors was a very different reality of abuse, fear, and secrets that no child should ever have to carry. In our conversation, Jason shares what it was like to grow up with that silence, how the effects of trauma followed him into adulthood through anxiety, and what it's meant to start reclaiming his life through honesty, healing, and continued self-work. This is good stuff, and I'm thrilled to bring it to you. Here's Jason. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me today. I'm really glad that you reached out to me. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Jason, would you take a minute and explain to the audience what made you want to reach out to me, and then also tell us about yourself?
Sure. I've listened to your podcast for a few months now, and then the latest episode that featured a male talking about sexual assault. I think we as a society have the connotation that sexual assault only happens to women. So when I heard the podcast featuring the male, I'm like, let me reach out to Dave and see if he'd be willing to speak with me as another male that's gone through something similar. So that's why I decided to reach out. A little bit about myself, aside from the sexual abuses. I grew up in Connecticut in a small town. I had a relatively normal childhood. I was close with my family, had lots of friends. My parents treated me well up to a certain point. Again, close with my grandparents. I never really went without. My family wasn't poor. They were comfortable. So I never went without stuff I needed or wanted. So at a young age, I always kind of felt a little bit different than the other kids that I would hang around with. And I didn't really realize what that was until I was older. I started thinking other boys in my 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade class were cute. And I knew that was wrong. At least that's what I was told, that it was wrong. So I kind of put those feelings aside. When I started to get older and go through puberty, I thought it was just a phase of puberty and that it would go away once puberty was over. But then when I made it to high school, I really started to realize that those feelings for other guys weren't going away. So I realized probably around 14 that I was gay, but I didn't tell anybody until I was 17. That was always something I carried. And even looking back now as an adult, back into my childhood and seeing home videos or pictures, it was clear that I was different than the other guys that I would hang around with. I just didn't know what it was at the time, because at that time we weren't really taught about what gay is. I mean, I had a gay aunt, but my parents at the time just told me that she lived with her friend, and that was that.
Well, it certainly at that point in time wasn't all that socially acceptable either.
Yeah, not really. I'm 35 now, so that was over 20 years ago. So I know we've come leaps and bounds since then, and even before that. I don't know the history behind why my parents told me about my aunt, but like that in that way. But as I got older and learned what it was, I'm like, okay, well, I kind of fit into that category. I mean, my family's always been accepting. I came out in high school and never got bullied or anything. Some people were surprised. Other people were, we've known since you were 5. So like I said, I never got bullied or had any issues with being gay. And I came out in high school. So I thought I would have issues just because kids can be mean.
Yeah.
But again, never had any issues. When I came out, it lifted a huge weight off of me that I carried for so long. Nobody in my family said that it was wrong, but I was so afraid of disappointing my parents or my family that I just kind of kept it to myself. But after I had said something, it was a ton of bricks off my shoulders.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom said she knew, but I wish she would have told me years ago.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. Yeah.
Just to stop me from overthinking.
Yeah. at least said something like, Jason, let's have a little talk,
Yeah,
before you
exactly.
came out. Would have
Yeah.
made things a little easier, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So fast forwarding through my life, I mean, I experimented with other guys because I wasn't sure what these feelings, I mean, I had girlfriends too in high school, but never really had deep feelings for them, like cared about them, but only as a best friend. After that, I again started experimenting and just really came into my own skin to realizing who I was. And then through college, I kind of embraced that. And I'm like, this is who I am. I mean, I can't change it. As a kid, when I started having these weird feelings, I had this little prayer book and I would literally try to pray that I would be normal. So I prayed for years and here I am. That didn't really work.
I'm really sorry for that experience of praying for something that really didn't need to be prayed for.
Yeah, now I know things happen for a reason. Everybody's made the way that they're supposed to be. I've realized that in adulthood. But as a young teen, I wanted the quote unquote normal look of a heterosexual couple with the white picket fence and a family.
Yeah.
But then as I got older, I realized I could still do that, just it wouldn't be with a female.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so fast forward to my 20s, I met my husband when I was 21, and now I'm 35. So we've been together for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
And we've been married since 2014. All my friends, family, they know there's not really anything to talk about. I don't feel the need to make that my whole personality. I have a lot more to offer the world than who I'm attracted to or who I'm married to, just the same as a straight person.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't walk up to people and meet them and say, hey, I'm Jason, I'm gay. That just happens to be who I am. I just don't let that thing define me. There's a lot more to me than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, tell us about your educational process. And you're a successful businessman. What's going on in your life with your education and with your work?
Great question. Originally, I wanted to be a news reporter. So I started studying communications in college, but I went to a really great high school, which I loved. If I could go back and do it again, I would. I had tons of friends and just a great time, great experiences.
Mm-hmm.
From high school, I started working at a bank as a part-time teller. And while I was working there, I was studying communications because, like I said, I wanted to be a news reporter. But from there, I kind of stuck into the financial realm. From the bank, went to a credit union and then got into bank technologies. I got into a big corporation selling banking software, the software that banks use to either process loans or mortgages, do transactions for customers that come in. And so I stopped going to school for news reporting because I'm like, well, I find this interesting. I mean, I've always liked reporting because no matter who it is, everybody has a story. I mean, I know I have a deep story, but no matter who somebody is, they always have a story, whether good or bad, they always have one. So that's why I liked news reporting. As I worked my way up in the financial technology realm, I decided to switch my major and I have a bachelor's in project management and a master's in organizational leadership. So I've worked my way up the ladder, starting from a part-time teller to where I am now at another payment technology company. And that's where my career has landed me now.
Yeah. And I take it that you're happy with your job. Things are going well. Good.
Yeah, I have a great team. The company I work for is a good company. They're constantly growing, and I obviously want to grow my career with them. They actually invest a lot in the employees to further their careers. It's a great company to work for.
Wow, that's awesome. And you don't find that very often. Well, you mentioned having found this podcast and listening to it, especially enthralled with the story that Johnny Brown told. Of course, that's why you reached out. So at this point, Jason, what I'd like to ask is, what are you able to tell us about your own rape or sexual assault experience?
After I heard Johnny's story, that kind of made me want to reach out because, like I said, not a lot of males speak out on this subject.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to share my story. When I was 8 years old, my parents had moved in my dad's family friend into our house. I don't know the whole story, but I think he was falling on tough times or between jobs or whatever. So he moved into our home. Shortly after he moved in, the sexual abuse started by him. He used to come into my room at night after everybody was asleep and come in and sexually abuse me. When it first started, I knew it wasn't normal because something like that had never happened before, but he was an adult, so I trusted that what he was saying was the truth because he was saying that it was normal and that everybody else does it. But he also said I couldn't tell my parents or he would kill my whole family. And that made me think, well, maybe this isn't normal, but at 8 years old, you trust what an adult says.
Yeah. Well, that kind of takes it out of the realm of normal, but I'm sure that put you in a very confused state of mind then.
I was confused because I used to tell my mom everything. So to have somebody tell me that I couldn't tell her, that was hard. But again, what I was told over and over again is that it was normal and that everybody did it. And specific names were given to me of mutual people that I had known as a kid. They would say, oh, well, these two people do this, so it's normal. It has to be a secret.
Wow. Yeah.
Each time it happened, it got more and more severe. This happened from when I was 8 and stopped when I was, I think, around 11. And it stopped after he had moved out. Every single time it happened, and it would almost happen every night for 3-4 years.
Really sorry for the experience that you had that even brings you to listen to my show and to reach out to me to tell this story. You're absolutely right. It should not have happened. And you have my deepest sympathy and sorrow for those things that happened to you. Mainly because of this next question I want to ask, what are you able to tell us about the impact that that had on your life in those years that this was happening? How did it affect your daily life?
The first time it happened, I kind of didn't feel anything as far as emotion wise. I was kind of numb because I had never been naked in front of anybody before that wasn't my parents as a child, either in the bathtub or whatever. So it felt weird from that aspect that my parents always taught me you shouldn't talk to strangers. Nobody should touch your privates. That was always in the back of my mind. But again, I kept going back to this person is older than me. I should listen to them. The way it impacted me is I would go to school and sometimes I would just look at my friends and think, I wonder if they're going through it because this person, Paul, always told me that it was normal and that everybody does it. So every time I was at school, I would think, should I ask my friends if they go through something similar, if it's so common? But I didn't. And I think maybe deep down inside, I knew it was wrong. But at the time, you trust adults, especially one that's living in your house.
Yeah. Did it impact you with, for instance, a sense of fear or any other emotional response that you may have had even coping during your days?
I was always afraid because I was afraid that if I didn't do what he wanted, that he would kill my family or me.
Yeah. That was the constant threat that he hung over your head, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
And so in my head, my whole family's sleeping. He could easily kill them. Then I thought to myself, if he kills me and my parents find me, how would that be for them?
Yeah.
So I just did what he said. And as I got older, when I realized what had happened, this is after it had stopped, I felt really gross. I mean, I still sometimes deal with things like that. I'm not worthy to have the life that I have now, but I still struggle with that sometimes, not as much as I used to, but I never wanted to get close to anybody in a romantic relationship because I felt like if I told them my truth of what had happened, that they would perceive me differently, like as gross, because that's how I looked at myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A sense of shame.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, was there guilt involved too? That maybe I'm doing something wrong I shouldn't be doing? Or was that guilt kind of washed away with the threat of death?
No, I felt like multiple phases of guilt. I felt guilty for not telling my parents. That was one part of the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of the guilt was I kept thinking, am I doing something to make him want to do this to me?
Yeah.
What did I do wrong, or like, why me? But again, at 8 years old, I didn't really think it was wrong, or I didn't know the severity of this situation, that it wasn't normal until I became older, which I think is why I never said anything. Because as kids, I would hang out with my friends and we would hide the ball on one of our other friends. It would be our secret. I kind of compared it to that. Well, it's okay to keep secrets because I didn't tell Cameron where the ball was. I hid it so he couldn't use it. So that went through my mind at 8 years old, that it's okay to keep secrets, and all secrets are kind of the same.
In terms of intensity and
Yeah.
effect, a lie is a lie.
Pretty much, yeah. And my parents always taught me not to lie. But then around Christmas time, they would say, oh, well, it's okay to white lie, not tell somebody what their present is, whatever.
Or even whether Santa Claus exists.
Exactly. So that's kind of where my mind was at.
Sure. Are you able to talk about the sensations and the feelings, the emotions that came out after it stopped and after he was no longer living in your house? What was that residual impact of the fact that that had been going on for 3 to 4 years? Plus, okay, now it's done.
Because it happened so frequently, it became the norm. It felt like it was part of my schedule. So when it stopped, I felt, what did I do to make it stop? I almost felt like it still should be happening because I was so used to it. I would ask myself again, like, what's wrong with me? Why did he stop doing this?
Yeah.
I don't want to say I craved it. After it stopped, it felt weird that it wasn't happening anymore.
Sure.
So it's almost, in the beginning, I felt, what did I do wrong for it to start? And then when it stopped, I said, well, what did I do for it, like, to make it stop?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had all these emotions flowing through and I couldn't discuss it with anybody. So I would journal, or I would just keep it to myself.
So it wasn't a sense of release or relief at all.
No.
It was a sense of, wow, this is messed up. No, it's gone. What's wrong with me?
Part of me was relieved that it was over, because I started learning that because I stopped like around when I was 11. So I started learning that that's not how adults should be. So I was relieved on one hand, and then on the other, I was like, again, like, what did I do wrong for it to stop?
Yeah.
I mean, besides the obvious of him moving out, I mean, I still saw him. So, well, when I see him, why isn't it happening? And maybe it's just because he didn't have the opportunity, or he grew out of it. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. With it stopping, how did that impact your life? What external factors were affected by the fact that the abuse wasn't happening on a regular basis? And you said this was almost every night, or was it every night?
Just about every night. Sometimes it would go a couple days without happening, but never longer than a week. So after it stopped at 11 years old, it was kind of like the ripple effects from an earthquake. After a while, I started questioning things, like if it was normal, or why me was another question. Why did this happen to me? Why was I the chosen one? And then I started placing blame on myself, because I'm like, apparently I did something to give this person an entrance into my innocence, basically. I kept thinking, what did I do to give him permission to do this?
Yeah. Like a sexual provocation.
Yeah. But again, at 8, I didn't know what sex was. I mean, I was just a child.
Right.
I didn't even know what gay was, like I said. So at 8, 9, 10 years old, I didn't think about gay or sex or naked people. Like, I mean, we would watch movies and I'd see people kiss, and my parents would cover my eyes or change the channel or whatever. So Like I said, it felt weird that I was naked in front of another adult, but because it was an adult, I thought it was okay.
Yeah. Jason, was that the end of the sexual abuse in your life after that person left your life?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever seen him since, or was there any contact afterwards?
That person still lives in Connecticut. I live in Florida, so I don't cross paths with that person usually ever. But if I did, I'm okay with that. It's probably more uncomfortable for him than it is for me because I've dealt with it. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm fully healed from it because it stripped away a piece of my innocence that I'll never get back.
Yeah.
If I saw him on the street, I wouldn't say hi, but
Mm-hmm.
I would just feel, I guess, indifferent. Like I said, even after a stop, it impacted me because I felt like I was only worthy of basically being used. So in my 15 to maybe 19, 20, I was quite promiscuous because I didn't think that I deserved anything on an emotional level because I just felt dirty and that if I told anybody what had happened, nobody would love me. So I just decided to get attention from all the wrong places.
Mm.
Then I met my husband.
I'm going to ask if you're able to tell us more about wanting to get attention in all the wrong places. What was your emotional take on that? I mean, at that age, it probably wasn't something you cognitively thought, wow, I'm promiscuous, right?
No, I didn't
It wasn't
think,
that. Or
no.
it was just more a lifestyle based on an experience, right? How did you process that?
Yeah, so like I said, after it had stopped happening, there was kind of two main emotions. One was relief, and then one was disappointment. Because at the end of the day, I was getting attention, whether that attention was, I mean, obviously it wasn't appropriate attention,
Right.
but I was getting attention.
Mm-hmm.
So when it stopped and I wasn't getting that attention, I took it upon myself to seek it in the gay community specifically. Like a lot of guys can be promiscuous, and I was. And I don't know other people's stories, but speaking for myself, I was that way, realizing that now because I was seeking that attention. I wanted that attention that I had got for those 3 to 4 years, that I was the focus. So I would meet these guys and get the attention that I was seeking based on what had happened
Mm-hmm.
to me. So I was trying to continue that uplift of what I felt.
Yeah. Well, psychologically, in an analytical process, that makes perfect sense too. In terms of where you were developmentally at that age, those are very formative years, needing connection, needing touch,
Mm-hmm.
needing relationships with other people that build into something formative. In retrospect, as you look back, do you see that as being part of that, that you were really, as you just said, trying to get some attention, but also I'm guessing there was probably some element of relationship seeking and relationship search?
Yeah, I thought, like, I was kind of like fishing, for lack of better words.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see maybe if I was this way to other people, somebody would eventually love me.
Yeah.
But I would lead with offering up basically my body
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
and then the emotions and the relationship would build after that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Sure. What has been the long-term impact for you in terms of sexual abuse being an element of your life?
I have lots of nieces and nephews, and if my brother tells me Ava's sleeping at this person's house or Caden is sleeping at this person's house, I always have a thought in the back of my mind. What if there's a dad or whatever? What if he would? And they're not even my kids, but I love them to death. So
Sure.
every time I hear that, I kind of like, that sticks in my brain. But not even just my nieces and nephews. I mean, we have friends that have kids that will say, "Oh, Liam's at a sleepover," and my mind goes to who else is at that house. Not, "Oh, that's great, he's at a sleepover, I'm sure he's going to have fun." My mind goes to the dark place.
Mm-hmm.
And still sometimes I find myself going back to my past, thinking about when I was a bit promiscuous. Still sometimes even though my husband has never judged me for anything like that, he knows absolutely everything about me. I still feel at times that I am gross, or because I've had something like this happen to me, I was never pure, or I became unpure at a young age.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, that your purity was actually taken by someone at a very young age. Like you said, before you even understood what sex was, what relationships were like, or what was right, what was wrong, getting
Mm-hmm.
mixed signals, but also having a death threat for your family and yourself hanging over your head. That's heavy. And then to look back now and have these questions about your own purity at those ages, it's very indicative of the trauma impact of rape and sex assault. It
Mm-hmm.
it it's indicative of how it messes your brain up. And like you said, you're still healing. That healing process really never ends. We talked a little bit about
No.
that before we started recording. Yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
healing that occurs for some people, and hopefully most people, preferably everyone, goes through at least some measure of healing from rape and sex assault. But it's a lifelong process, and it still impacts your brain and your thought processes, and I'm sure even your relationship with your husband. There's aspects of rape and sex assault that the negative impact never goes away. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. If I'm stuck somewhere, if I get my arm stuck somewhere or whatever, I don't like being held down or not being able to escape still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't like elevators. I don't think it has to do with claustrophobia. I think it has to do with my control of not being able to escape.
Is there a process your brain goes through in situations where you're always looking for an escape route?
Yeah, everywhere I go, I fly a lot, and that I have learned techniques and therapy to kind of self-talk, self-calm, because obviously if you're in the air on an airplane, you can't escape, or that would hurt. Um, so so
Not
there's a
just
certain,
yourself. I think that would impact
yeah,
a lot of people.
right. Yeah, and
But
I don't have a parachute.
yeah, but you're right. There's that aspect of being controlled, right?
Yeah. And even certain smells. He had a distinct smell, not bad, but there's certain lotions, if I moisturize my hands or something, and it smells like what he smelled like, that takes me back to my room. I've struggled with panic attacks since I was 8, but now that I'm an adult, knock on wood, they're under control. I mean, they still happen, but not as frequent as they did. I would have to self-calm, say I'm not in that situation anymore. I'm in a safe space. I'm not in harm's way. I have control. Stuff like that that I still work on to this day.
Yeah. Coping mechanisms
Yeah.
that are necessary for even getting through daily routine. Sure.
Yeah.
Jason, all of this leads up to something that I want you to talk about too, and that's the fact that you've written a book. Are you able to
Yes.
talk to us about that whole process? What made you decide to do that? And tell us about the title and how you landed on that title, and some about the book, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. I couldn't tell anybody anything. So I had always kept a journal of what had happened, whether it be the good things in my day or the sexual abuse that we just talked about. I would always write it down. And I had for a while written every single day. And then as an adult, I went back into those journal entries and read through them again. And I'm like, you know what? I should maybe tell my story, because I know we didn't mention this in the interview, but I was also, after my parents got divorced, my dad became very abusive, not sexually, but he became very emotionally and physically abusive. So it's like throughout my whole life, when the sexual abuse stopped, the physical and emotional abuse started. So I never really had a break in some sort of abuse from 8 years old to 18, 19 years old. I never had a break. Again, I kept thinking, oh, well, this is probably normal. But then as an adult, I thought, well, this isn't normal. And there's other people that are in my situation. So why not share my story? I mean, after I've told people, more people have reached out to me either on Instagram or Facebook or family friends that saying, hey, can I talk to you because I've gone through something similar. That's why I decided to write a book. It's a memoir from the time I was 8 till now. So the book is called Secrets Beneath, that comes out in December. But I wanted to share my story because when I was going through sexual abuse and the abuse that my dad and his then girlfriend was doing, I felt really alone in that nobody else has gone through this. I know it's cliche to say, well, I just want to help people, but it's really what I want to do. Like I said, I felt really alone, and I'm hoping my story makes more people comfortable to come out or to realize that if they've gone through something in their life that's probably worth sharing, because what I thought was normal ended up being traumatic.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get my story and my feelings out because I was silenced for so long.
Sure. What has been the impact of writing the book? And even the process of while you were writing it, what was that like in terms of dealing with those sometimes even buried emotions, but oftentimes suppressed or dealt with, but in a way that were manipulated into coping mechanisms? How did that process of writing the book impact all of that?
When I started, I thought it was going to be therapeutic to talk about. But it was actually quite difficult because I don't directly think about that part of my life anymore.
Mm.
I mean, there's still residual effects like we talked about, but I don't actively think about that on a daily basis. So I've kind of had to dig up old memories that I didn't really want to think about anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm able to do that because of the years of therapy that I've gone through. I mean, I started therapy when I was 16 or 17, and I've been in therapy ever since. But I've learned how to protect myself. Everybody has said, oh, well, you're so brave for telling your story. Honestly, I don't feel brave or special. I'm just telling a story of what happened. I don't want to say that I feel like I'm brave because I don't want somebody to think if they don't want to tell their story that they're not brave.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've never considered myself as brave for telling my story. You're just brave for going through something like that and surviving.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I've never tagged myself as brave.
I can understand that. And it makes sense to me because of the way you've described the evolution of your healing and this whole process. But I find myself constantly telling my guests, wow, you're brave, you're strong, your fortitude and your resilience are amazing. And even though you don't feel that way, from an outsider looking in, I certainly see it that way. I think
you.
it takes
I
a
appreciate
lot.
that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think you deserve some attention that way, some glory even of surviving that to the point where you're willing to say, hey, I know there's other people out there who've experienced this, and I want to tell my story because maybe you'll relate, and maybe what I went through is going to help you. Was there some actual internal help that you derived from doing that yourself? Are you looking back and seeing now, yeah, that even though it wasn't intended on your part to be a therapeutic process, that maybe it was?
Yeah, I think the therapeutic part for me is if this helps somebody else, even just one person, or one person has told their mom or their dad or whatever that something's happened to them, I think that's the therapeutic process for me. Knowing that it's helped somebody will actually in turn help me. But as far as writing the book being a therapeutic activity for me, I didn't see it that way. But it's what hopefully will come of sharing my story.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's commendable. I think there's a huge benefit in that. And if there wasn't, then I don't know that you would have put your book out there to be published, right? I mean,
Right.
there's a goal, there's a purpose in mind, whether it's internally manifested or not. Your hope is that it's externally manifested for others. And I know it will be, just as your story here today is. This platform is designed to do two things. Number one, help my guest on their own healing journey, but also the listeners on their healing journey. It's a community. You don't want this community for anybody. But since
No.
there is rape and sexual assault, I'm thankful that there is a community. I think that it's important to have a platform like this where people can feel safe enough to tell their story the way they want to tell their story and the way they want to do it and the words they want to use, and not be disbelieved and not be blamed. And that's a huge portion of what this is all about. And my goal is to lessen the impacts of rape culture, which are those two things. The rape culture says that it's the victim's fault, and we blame victims of rape and sexual assault for their own crime. But even when there's not victim blaming necessarily, there's oftentimes disbelief. Did that
Right.
really happen, or is he just, or or she just looking for attention, looking for somebody to pat them on the head and say, oh, you poor thing? I think that's a huge misnomer in the lay person's mind of someone who's never been raped or sexually assaulted, and the way they look at victims and survivors in today's culture of Me Too and all of the stuff you see on social media now, where victims are speaking out and forming communities, and the Epstein issue and the Bill Cosby issue, and even going back several years to the Michael Jackson issue. And there have been so many celebrities who've been accused, and that common response is, oh, you're just looking to get into their deep pockets. No, that's not what this is about at all. One other aspect of this that I want to touch on with you and ask about is one of the slogans that I've adopted for this show is we need to normalize the conversation. I think that's what I'm picking up on from you as to why this book was written, is that you want people to read it and talk about this stuff and make sure that we do start normalizing the conversation in order to lessen the impact of rape culture and bring down the prevalence rate of rape and sex assault. Can you talk about that in terms of your hopes and goals for the impact this book has?
I'm not a therapist by any means, but from what I've learned in therapy, it's okay to share your story and it's okay to not share your story.
Right.
And if you're not ready to share your story, let's say something's happened to you and you want to share your story, but you're not ready yet, there's no timeline. And if you just confide in one person when you're ready, that will make a world of a difference to get it off your chest. And that's just what I found worked for me. I just want people to realize to not be ashamed if they're not ready to tell their story, or if they never want to tell their story. That is up to them. Yeah. I think what like a lot of people need to realize is that the control was taken from them in whatever situation they've gone through. But for telling your story, you're the one that's in control to tell it or to not tell it.
Right.
And if somebody makes you feel bad for not telling your story, then they probably shouldn't be in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a strong emphasis point that I want to talk about too. I offer this platform to people like you, to my other guests, only if people are ready. A lot of people feel like they should because the Me Too movement, we all have to join together. We all have to speak out as one big voice. I'll be transparent. You already know this, but to other listeners, I vet every guest that I bring on this show to actually talk about those issues. Are you ready to do this? Are you aware of the impact that this is going to have on you if you're not ready? And what are you doing to take care of yourself? And that's a question I want to get to with you too, in terms of this interview in particular. I think what you've done is hit the nail on the head and brought a very important aspect to the forefront. And that is, if you're not ready to talk about your rape or sexual assault experience, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the human response to trauma. Some people want to talk about it, but can't talk about it. Their brains won't let them. And that's
okay.
Yeah, it's absolutely okay. There's a certain aspect of the brain, that the part of our brain that allows us to talk. Well, trauma interferes with that. And some people want to talk, but can't because the brain is saying, don't. I can't handle it if we talk about this, or if I talk about this. And that, as you said, is just perfectly okay. There may come a day when you are ready, and there may not. And that's okay too. Yeah.
And I think the misconception is that talking about your story is the only way to heal from it. I think just by listening to your podcast or writing down what happened to you on a piece of paper and then burning it, I think there's multiple ways to heal. And I don't think that talking about it is the only way to help you heal.
Right.
There's other avenues you can go down. And whether that be even walking out into the woods alone and saying it out loud and then just leaving it there. Healing isn't always telling somebody exactly what happened. That's not the only avenue to heal.
That's right. And healing's different for everyone. And it's a different path. There are some commonalities, but it's a very individual path. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other misconception is to heal or to move on, you have to forgive people. I only think you have to forgive somebody if they've ever added value to your life. like for example, if my husband did something, in order for me to move on, I would have to forgive him because he's been a huge part of my life and he's added value. This person that has stripped my innocence as a young child, I don't need to forgive them to move on. I just move on and become indifferent about that person because that person never added value to my life. So again, I think it's always drilled into our minds that you have to forgive somebody to move on. In my opinion, that is not the truth.
I see that point. And I think there are a lot of people who listen to this who feel the same way. And I know there are people who feel the opposite way, that, well, you're not going to move on, even though you think you are, without forgiveness. Your life is living proof that you can move on, that you can function, that you can handle whatever comes your way without ever having forgiven someone who's done a tremendous harm to your psyche, to your cognitive abilities, and to your lifestyle and the way you move on through life. Yeah.
To whoever's listening, I don't have everything figured out. I'm still going through a healing journey that will probably never end. This is just what works for me, and the things that I've done in my life so far works, but every day of my life is not rainbows and unicorns. I mean, I'm human. I still struggle with these things that I've gone through, but I don't have it all figured out, and I probably never will. I just do what I do as best as I know how, and surround myself with a good support system.
Right.
So that's just what's worked for me. I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah. None of us have.
No.
Jason, after this interview is over, it will have an impact that you and I sat here and talked. And obviously what we've talked about has brought a lot of the past to the forefront of your thinking process, to the cognitive aspect of your brain. It's normal and inevitable that these discussions like this, on every guest that I have, these discussions have a residual impact in terms of the brain continuing to think about the past. And oftentimes it activates implicit memories we didn't even know were there. We have the story of the explicit memories, which is what you just talked about, but then we get away from this, and maybe tonight, later on, or tomorrow, or the next day, or weeks from now, or maybe even months from now, this particular conversation that you and I are having will pop into your mind, and something about the rape or sex assaults will activate, and you'll remember. What will you do to take care of yourself? Not only then, if it's 3 or 6 months down the road, but even tonight. How will you take care of yourself once this interview's over?
I've learned tools over the years. I mean, I love being outside. I mean, where I am right now is getting dark. Even just going outside for 5 minutes for fresh air, or watching something funny, or just kind of reassuring yourself that you're safe. That's what I do now. If I'm struggling, is to just take care of yourself and be easy on yourself. I'm probably the hardest person on myself, but and I don't always take my own advice, but I do have the tools in my toolkit to know how to manage any struggles I might face.
A lot of times that means exactly what you just said, is taking yourself out of the here and now and where your brain is, and putting yourself somewhere else, going outside, immersing yourself in comedy. Or those people who are listening who have pets, a lot of them rely on animals to have a connection with and take them away from those immediate thoughts of whatever may be distressful.
Yep. We do have 2 dogs, and they have been very paramount in my healing journey. Just their presence, or just letting me hug them, or them just laying next to me. There's something about it that's just therapeutic in itself, and you don't even really have to do anything. And I was never a dog person until I got dogs myself. So they've been a huge part of my healing journey.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Jason, this has been fascinating for me, and I know for my audience there are going to be lots of people who hear this who are extremely appreciative of you taking the time to, number one, listen to my podcast, number two, reach out to me as a result of that, and the impact that it had on your life, listening to Johnny and some of the other episodes you may have listened to. Thank you for that, but thank you for having the fortitude and the strength to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to tell my story too. And I know we talked about this too, that you were kind of surprised when I responded. I want my listeners to know that that's a real possibility that if you write to me or text me and say, hey, I've got a story and I'd like to talk to you about the possibility of being on the show, that's a very real possibility that it'll happen. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It means a lot to give me a platform to share my story and talk about my book. I really appreciate you.
I hope that book is extremely successful for you.
If it helps one person, then I've done my job.
Yeah, well, that's a great attitude. I appreciate that. I'm guessing it's going to be available, like most books are, through Amazon and maybe a couple of other different outlets.
Thanks, Dave. Definitely keep in touch, and I wish you much success in your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you're part of the Sexual Assault Survivor Stories family now, so we will stay in touch.
Thanks for making me a part of it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Jason, let's do this again sometime. I'd love to get some follow-up on how the book's doing 6 or 8 or 10 months down the road. See how you're doing. Yeah, okay, great. Well, like you said, we'll stay in touch.
Definitely. I really appreciate your time, Dave.
You bet. Talk to you later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That does it for another episode of Sexual Assault Survivor Stories, the SAS podcast. As I bring this conversation with Jason to a close, I want to honor what he shared with us. When someone is willing to tell the truth about a childhood filled with pain and silence, it takes real strength. Jason did not come here to perform a story. He came here to speak honestly about abuse, about anxiety, and about what it really looks like to keep choosing healing even when the journey is difficult and uncertain. What you heard today was not a polished narrative about being fixed. It was a real conversation about continuing to walk the road of recovery with honesty, commitment to wellness, careness for the nervous system, and a deep connection to living in the present. If today's episode spoke to you, I want you to know that you're not behind, you're not broken, and you're not alone. Healing is not a finish line. It's a continuing act of courage. And every time a survivor like Jason chooses to use his voice, the circle of silence gets smaller and the circle of hope grows. Jason, thank you for trusting this space and for sharing your story with such openness and grace. For all of you listening, thank you for being part of the SAS audience, for holding space for these stories, and for keeping this work moving forward. Thank you for listening with compassion and curiosity, and for staying committed to understanding the real impact of trauma on the lives of survivors. This is why the SAS podcast exists, to normalize the conversation, to educate, and to hold space for those stories so they can lead to justice, understanding, and change. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs it. Keep the conversation going in your circles, your communities, and your workplaces. And as always, start by believing, because we all know someone whose life has been impacted by rape or sexual assault. We'll see you next week.